All right, welcome to the Global PhysEd Voxcast. I'm here with Dale Sidebottom. Dale, thank you so much for joining us. I've been following your work for such a long time, and I feel like I already kind of know you and we have this connection because I've been following your work so closely on social media and everything else. And it seems like you're everywhere. You do so much, and you always bring this intensity and this energy. So I appreciate you waking up early in the morning in Australia and coming on the show. So how are you? How's everything going?
Yeah, Hawaii, fantastic. And thank you very much for having me on the show, mate. We're just talking before about sort of how you feel like you already sort of know someone before you've been on here. And I suppose that's the beauty of particularly Twitter. I think that's where it all started for me, connecting with educators around the world and where I followed a lot of your work. So, mate, I'm going really well. I'm sorry if my head pops up everywhere. Some people call it spam. I just like to get it out there, but I'm really excited to be on the show, Legend.
All right, so I wanted to like start off with a little bit of background on yourself, and I always like to ask my guests, how they got into education, how they got into the realm of education. So same question, for you. How did this all start for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in country Victoria in Australia, and I suppose living in the country in Australia, there's not really much else to do besides play sport all year round, and I did that my whole life. And I think the main part of the question there, Hawaii, is that growing up, I had two fantastic role models as educators in
Mm,
Barry Simmons and Graham Wade, and they really. I wasn't a problem child, but as you can probably imagine, I had a lot of excess energy, and sometimes teachers took that the wrong way, and I probably used it the wrong way. But for some reason, I just felt at home in PE, and I wanted to have the sort of same impact on other students and children that Graham and Barry had on me. So the natural sort of progression was after I finished year 12, I did like an AFL traineeship, which is like through the Australian Football League. And I did that for a year at the high school I went to, and basically was like a trainee teacher. And by the end of the year, I was running classes, I was doing it all. And sort of the natural progression was then that I went to university and studied PE teaching for 4 years. And I suppose from there, I've taught at primary schools of PE, taught in London for 3 years. I've taught in high school, I've taught in the classroom. So I've done a number of different things. And one thing I found is I just love coming up with new ways to sort of motivate and engage students. And my one thing, Hawaii, was that I don't always think learning should be done just sitting down. And for
yeah.
me, as a very energetic person, I think that's where I didn't excel as much in school when we're just sort of sitting down and learning. So one of the big passion things that I'm passionate about now is finding ways to mix movement and learning at the same time. And when you can do that in a fun, engaging way, I call it, that's when the magic happens. So for me, that's sort of the nutshell of where it all started. I wanted to sort of have the same impact that those two role models had on me as growing up.
So what was it about those two role models that you think kind of in reflecting kind of stood out for you and really kind of motivated you to go into education? So I kind of think about some of my teachers and the ones that really showed that they had this caring this caring attitude towards their students are the ones that stand out to me, right? So what was it for you? What stood out to you that said, I want to be like that. That's the kind of person I want to be like.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head, away that caring, it all comes back to relationships.
Yeah.
And for me, the time, effort, and just care and love. And I know love's not a word that we normally share, but they actually love what they did, and they
Hmm.
took a real genuine interest in, you know, particularly myself and other students that really sort of excelled in PE. And they were just really good blokes. Like they were just really nice guys, and they did care. And I think for me, that's one thing I loved. And I talk about this in, doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, connection is the key. So if you're
Yeah.
rolling into any class, it's connection before content. Do not start teaching something unless you have won the students over and you've built that relationship. And I think that's one thing I sort of struggled with a lot, and I still do, that people will just sometimes expect a lot of things from you before you've sort of won them over. And those
Mm.
two never did. They took time to get to know everyone. They invested time in figuring out, how did you go on the weekend in sport? How's everything going? And they'd talk to you. They'd take that time. And I think as teachers, that is, I know we've got so much work to get through, Hawaii, and we're time poor, but that's just one of the most crucial things. And I think PE teachers probably do that better than anyone. I don't know if it's because it's a natural, relaxed environment. We're moving around. We're not in the classroom. We're in the gym or whatever. But yeah, for me, it was something that I didn't get in other areas of my schooling. And it just made me feel, I don't know, it built that trust and I felt safe. And that is one
Yeah.
area that I wanted to, be able to sort of invest in my students when I was teaching as well, like, Graham and Barry did for me.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to create that environment where kids feel safe and kids can psychologically, sort of let their guard down a little bit so they
I don't know what
can.
it is, but yeah, when you build those relationships correctly and you get that connection, it really allows you to excel. And as I said, like, it made me want to be like them. And if I still speak to both the guys, and if I said this to them, and I've told them numerous times what they've done for me, and they go, "Oh, you're silly. You've been silly. Don't worry about it. It's just what we do." And I
Yeah.
think we brush it off, but it's amazing the impact you have. And I know a lot of teachers listening now, and you'd be exactly the same way. The amount of students and children out there that you have changed their life and you wouldn't even know, and we brush it aside. But that is what we do, and that's the power of building relationships.
See, and that's interesting too because it's almost it's a genuine part of who they are, right? And that's what kind of speaks to the students as well. They didn't do it for show. They didn't do it to check off a box. They did it because that's who they are, and
Yeah,
the love that they felt they wanted to extend to the kids or to their students, right? And that's I think, again, kind of in retrospect, looking back at some of the teachers that impacted me, that's what stands out is that they
yeah.
genuinely loved what they did and they extended that love to their students.
Yeah, and it's not fake. You can
Yeah,
always see through someone that's putting something on or doing it just because.
yeah,
Yeah, as you said, and I know you. I bet if I asked you the same thing, you could remember one or two teachers that did exactly the same to you. And
yeah.
it sticks in your head because it's memorable. They change your life, and they don't do it because it's their job. They do it because that's the sort of person they are. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have that same impact on students.
Mhm.
And be that positive role model.
Yeah, and what's interesting in sort of my story is I think I have both, and I wonder if you have both as well. So there were some teachers that impacted me in a positive way, and I saw that how much they cared about it, how much they cared about what they did and the students that they taught. And then there was those teachers who didn't. And I remember at a very young age thinking, I don't want to be like that. Do you
Yeah,
have the same? Do,
correct.
do you have the
Yeah,
same kind of experience?
I did, and as I said, I wasn't the best student in the classroom,
Yeah,
and
me
my
neither. Me neither. I
and
we share that.
and yeah, and I bet so many people, if they're like running or driving or whatever they're doing, they're nodding, listening along,
Right.
and again, it probably comes back to I didn't feel as safe in the classroom because I wasn't as good in the classroom as I was at PE,
Mm.
and and because I was a bit loud and boisterous and confident, that some of the teachers might not have liked that. They might have thought that as sort of not the sort of way to carry on inside the classroom. Whereas in PE, I was allowed to be that person. I was
Mhm.
encouraged to be that person. So I think it's just a different way how we embrace students' qualities. And don't get me wrong, it's not for me to be loud all the time in the classroom, but instead of looking at it as a negative, I think we need to find the positives in each student and find ways to harness those. But I just remember the teachers that they would sort of put me down, and they would, like, because I'm not the best reader or writer, and that's something
Mhm.
that stuck with me for a long time already because I was sort of told that, I was categorized that as a young age. So
Mm.
yeah, I suppose I do remember those. I try and block them out now because yeah, it's not the best memories you have, but like you just said, mate, everybody's got these, and it is funny. You still remember the good and the bad, and I suppose that's how life goes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because again, I share the same kind of challenges. Like I'm not the best reader, and to this day, I do not like reading in front of people. Like it makes me nervous. I don't like it, and it kind of comes from the way uh, that was handled when I was growing up, when I was going through school, and it sticks with us, right? And
Yeah.
so it's really interesting to hear you say how some of those things stick with us because some of those bad things that you experience, um, they impact your life, but also some of the good things, right? And so as
Yeah.
physical education teachers, or as teachers, educators in general, we have this really important role in our students' lives, and we can be that bad memory that sticks with them for a long time, or we could be that good memory that inspires them to do great things.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good point you just made there, that you do remember certain things. And one of the things that sticks out for me is that we would sit in our desks or we'd sit in a circle and we'd take it in turns of reading out loud. And
Yeah.
for me, I don't even know what anyone else read because I was so
Yeah.
nervous and I knew I'd stuff it up and people would laugh at it. And so my biggest pet hate is isolating anybody in any game. And
Mm,
too often I do a lot of work with primary school classroom teachers now about icebreakers or connection starters, I call them. And too often there's a game in a circle and you go around and you take it in turns of doing something and everybody watches your aid. I call that an ice maker because nobody is actually focusing on anything but what they're going to do or say. Um,
right.
and it's exactly the same as reading out loud in front of your peers. That it's not a way to build confidence. There's other ways of doing that. And that you can do it in small groups where, it's not all about what you're going to do and there's not as much pressure on you. And like you just said, there's always ways to remember the positives. But I've got a big passion now about not categorizing students, not putting them in groups, because I always knew when I walked into the room, they would have the literacy groups on the wall and I'd be in the lowest one.
Yes.
Best. I didn't see myself up the top in PE all the time. So it's exactly the same as well with in the classroom when we're reading or we're doing things, that it shouldn't be the limelight on one student all the time, because they're the worst memories I have. And it still gives me, like, I do not like reading out loud.
Yeah.
That's probably
Yeah.
why we're both quite good at podcasting because we find that natural, you know what I mean? And I just think having those bad memories at the start, they've stuck with me, and I can tell they've stuck with you, mate.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it is interesting how some of those things get etched in your mind, and they stay there, and they stay there, and you can still feel it. Like I can think back to, my elementary years, having the same kind of thing, read out loud, and me kind of trying to memorize what I'm reading, because I just, it would make me anxious, it would make me nervous. I'm not the best reader, all these things combined. Uh, Worrying about, the social stigmatism of being called out like that,
Yeah,
and like I said, I can still feel those things, and again, I think we have such an important role in these kids' lives, and when we single them out like that,
yeah,
sometimes kids aren't ready for that, and sometimes kids will sort of fail. But what's interesting also about some of those failures, I think for me, at some point in my life, I took them as challenges as well, you know, because I know for me, and I've talked about this on the podcast. I remember my school counselor when I was in high school. My brothers. Okay, so a little background on me. My parents came from Mexico, moved to the United States with a very very little education, and uh, uh, my brothers weren't. Yeah, I'm the youngest of five, and my brothers weren't, the best academically, and they one of my brothers dropped out of high school, and all this stuff, and so I was kind of always in their shadow, right? And I would get a teacher that my brothers would have, and they'd say, "Oh, I know you. You're one of those Rodriguez kids.
yeah,
I know you. I know
yeah.
you." And I would always think, "You don't know me. You don't know me." And I remember my school counselors. I was a high jumper, and so I wanted to go to college. They had offered me a scholarship to go to the University of Houston. And my school counselor said, "I don't know if you should do that because I don't think you could make it in a 4-year college." And I was like, "What? Are you?
Wow.
Why would you say that
Oh,
to me?"
talk about shutting someone down.
I know. And he's
Oh.
like, "I think you should stay here, go to the community college and whatnot." And so that was the last time I talked to him, right? And I took the scholarship. I went to the University of Houston, graduated, later went back to school, got my master's, and the whole and I can still remember the feeling, right? Of him shutting me down, of him not thinking I was good enough, and me thinking, "I'm gonna show you. I am good
Yeah.
enough. I'm gonna show you. I'm not gonna let this stop me." And then, of course, going to college and getting my degree. Um, but that was that was a big motivating factor. Somebody challenging me like that and not believing in me, and me saying, "You know what? I'm gonna show you."
Yeah, and I suppose you've used a negative there as a positive to fuel your passion to prove someone wrong, which
Yeah.
there's a little bit of evidence out there that that's not a good way to get results, but it always does get
Right.
results. You know what I mean? Like
Right,
it's not a
right.
good way to want to prove someone wrong way,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, mate, that's a really powerful way to do it. And it is a hard thing, like you just said, to as a kid to change that mindset when somebody is, not is is not sort of putting you up on a pedestal or saying you can do it. It's very hard for you to have that resilience to think, no, I can do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why as teachers, if we are pigeonholing kids or we're putting them in place and saying you're not good enough or that you should go down this path, that you shouldn't go to university tech, you should go to a community college because
Yeah.
it's safer. A lot of
Right.
kids don't have the resilience to say, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to do that. And I think that's where, it's all about changing that mindset and empowering our students because everybody's good at something. We're not all the same. We're not all going to be the best readers out loud, like we're not going to be,
Yeah.
but we've got all skills and it's about finding those and empowering those students so they realize that they are good at that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder also how much of it is is setting challenges for your students. And I'm not suggesting we should do that in class by any means, but
Yeah.
but setting challenges for your students that are sort of just right for them, right, at their level, so that it's not easy and it's not boring because it's easy, but they've decided where that level is and they can challenge themselves appropriately, right? It's not too hard. It's not too easy. There's sort of that Goldilocks zone. That's a just right challenge that will help motivate the students to be their best.
Yeah, and I think as teachers, if we set the environment up right and we build the trust, we build the relationships, those students should be the ones setting those challenges themselves because
Right.
they know they're they're the ones that know what is a little bit hard for them, what's an easy one, what's sitting on the fence, what's not challenging them, and that if we set the environment up right away, that's where the students take over and they actually do that for themselves because we're trying to teach them to be lifelong learners and that it's not always about us setting the challenges or boundaries of what they need to achieve because when they finish high school or when they finish university, they're not going to have us there to set those challenges for them. And
Right.
it's like physical literacy or emotional literacy, whatever you want to call it. We need to set our students up to be lifelong learners, as well as that, to be able to be resilient when they leave, to be able to handle, the ups and downs or things that don't go right. So if somebody is not putting them in the category or pumping them up. They need to be able to find a way to move on to that, to motivate themselves. And
Hmm.
again, that comes back to setting challenges that you can achieve if you work hard. Um, and if you fail, it is okay because that is one of the biggest things. We don't always win. And I know growing
Yeah.
up that nearly every student got a ribbon or a medal or whatever. And I feel like saying to kids now, like, I'm sorry, guys, but you're not going to win in life every single day. And
Right.
that I think that's the biggest thing that we can take away that the students need to realize that. And that if they don't win, it is okay because you can work harder and you can learn from that because a failure is the best lesson you'll ever have if you look at it the right way. All right. And that's my biggest thing, I suppose, these days is that don't be scared to fail. And if you do it, learn from it and go again. And I think if we can keep installing that in our students, they're going to be fantastic students when they leave us as educators.
Yeah, and I remember it makes me think about, I used to tell my students all the time. I'm teaching kindergarten now, so I kind of have to tell them at their level. But when I was teaching elementary, and my fifth grade, fourth graders would get very competitive at certain activities, I would always tell them that the competition is less about winning and losing. Like that's part of it. Winning and losing
Yeah,
is part of it. But I would tell them competition is really more about being able to play that game again, presenting yourself in a way that the people around you want to play with you again. Because if they don't, then you never get to compete again. So
you're
winning and
correct.
losing is part of it. But if you win and you gloat, they don't want to play with you again. And if you lose and you throw a fit, they don't want to play with you again. Or if you're cheating, or if you're, if you're doing any number of things, they might not want to play with you again. And if you don't get that opportunity to do that, then you've lost,
Yeah,
right? So the competition aspect should be less about winning at all cost or being upset when you lose, and more about the people around you. And I
yeah.
think a lot of students kind of understood that concept because again, if you don't get the opportunity, then you don't get to play again.
No, you don't. And I think that's a great point. And what I used to say to students is it's not just about the game, and it's not about if you win, you do not rub it in other people's faces. You do not
Yeah,
tell them that you're better than them. You won. Because the game doesn't matter. You'll leave PE or whatever you're doing, and half an hour later you would have forgot what you were even playing anyway. And I
yeah,
relate this back to when you're in a social setting as an adult and somebody is just talking about themselves all the time. That
mm,
while you're talking, they're already thinking about a way that they can talk about themselves. And
yeah,
that's exactly the same as what I say to primary school kids. No one wants to talk to that person, all right? Because they don't listen to what you're saying and they make it all about themselves. And it's exactly the same in the PE class. If you're going to be a bad loser and rub everything in and like, put people down because you're better than them, no one's going to want to play with you. No one's going to want to socialize with you. That is not a good way to be. Do not brag. Do not gloat. The best tool you can have is listening. And like in sport, it has been a good loser, and that's been empathetic. And
yeah.
I think real life situations can relate to, and particularly some of the people, and again, listeners will be able to go, yeah, I know that person that constantly talks about themselves all the time, does not listen to what I say. I can guarantee that was a kid in class that wasn't
Mm.
empathetic and would rub everything in or that, oh, I'm better than you, we won, rah, rah, rah. And it sort of flows on into life. So, like you just said, we can teach them as much as we can in primary school, high school, elementary. It doesn't matter what situation. But if they don't listen and take it on board, they're going to be the same when they get older in a social setting, I feel.
Yeah, and that's a good point because it does translate into sort of real life, right? Because could you imagine, uh, in class knowing that kid who always cheated or always gloated when they won or maybe threw a fit when they lost or whatever that might be, and them opening up a business, right? Would you want to go to that business if you were like, oh, I know that person, and I remember he would always cheat, you know? You
Yeah, you
probably
would.
wouldn't. I'm not gonna buy a car from that guy because he might cheat me.
The car would be dodgy as I wouldn't
You're
go there.
right. Exactly. Those things, I think you're right, though. I think those things definitely translate into sort of those real world situations. So if you present yourself in a competition setting, if you present the best side of yourself, then people will treat you that way, right?
Yeah, I know. Again, I think, and that's why I love PE and I love sport because it relates to all aspects of life. And I feel through PE and just play in general that that's where we create our strongest social circle. So if you
Yeah.
are not a good teammate, if you're an individual, all different things, and it will relate to the rest of your life. It'll be in your relationships, the way you treat people,
Mm,
the way you do business, it, the way you are as a young kid. And if you do not change those and I wasn't the best kid. I was always like that. And I suppose like everyone you develop, but I feel if you've got the right genetics and you've been taught the right way, that eventually they will ring through. And
yeah.
that is just the one thing that I love about sport is that you can really pull those kids aside that, like you just said, that might be selling something down the track and say, look, no one will want to be your friend because you're acting like this. And you
Right.
can do it in a way where it's not a negative, it's a positive. Like you can praise them for the good things they do and say,
Mm,
let's focus on these, keep doing that because that is a person we want to see. We don't want to see this side of you. And the reason will be, and I think you can relate it back to that because they will experience that in PE. Whereas in the classroom, I don't feel classroom teachers get that sort of the impact we can have
mm.
because the life lessons we see in PE relate to nearly every area of their life when they leave school.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. And I know, so again, I teach kindergarten right now, and one of the things that I love about my school is that it's a play-based school, and a lot of these life lessons happen on the playground. And I know
Yeah.
you're big on the play-based experiences and the play-based learning. Can you talk a little bit about that? What is play-based learning to you, and why is it important?
Yeah, so for me, like that play is essential because I call it play-based mindfulness because when we are playing, we are so present. It's not funny. Like there's nothing else going on, and
Yeah,
particularly, and I know your school is very progressive because I speak to Andy and Neela quite a lot, but um, that we're so consumed, we're so busy these days that. uh, being bored is just something we don't do. So finding ways to be present is just crucial. And so for me, when you can mix play and learning together, I just feel it's an amazing, it just gets great results. And I just love the social connections and um, sort of the teamwork, the bonding that comes through play that you just don't get anywhere else. And that is the one thing I love about play. And it doesn't matter if it's in the classroom, if it's outside, if it's learning, if it's at home, wherever it is. One thing I've found and why I'm so passionate about it now that we need to keep doing it in schools is because the older we get, the less we play. And
Hmm.
I see too many adults now. I do a lot of corporate workshops or just with teachers in general. And we get the kids to play all day, but we don't play ourselves. And when we stop playing, we start slowly dying inside. So my thing is I'm seeing the effect it's having on adults. And that's why I'm so passionate about that. It doesn't matter what age you are, that you need to have some form of play in your day. Something that, and it just comes back to having fun, something that will make you laugh. And too often when you play correctly, that is all you're doing. You're having fun and you're laughing and you're so present and you're probably sharing that experience with someone else. And that is why play to me is the number one thing you need to do every day.
Yeah, and I think, like you were saying, when you're playing and you're playing correctly, I think a lot of times that also looks like being in the flow, right? Being in
Yeah,
flow, and you know, time doesn't matter anymore. You're ultra focused on this one thing, and you're just enjoying it, right? You're enjoying the moment. You're doing it for the sake of doing it, and I think a lot of times, yeah, you're right. Parents or as adults, we're not sort of allowed to play, you know? And I
yeah,
know we've been talking a lot in my school about how to sort of educate parents on how to play. Because again, sometimes it's not allowed. Like we have to be adults now, and we're not allowed to be goofy. But our kids, that's what they're wanting. That's what they need. They need to
yeah,
have these crazy imaginations, and we're telling them to stop. And so I think it's important to absolutely like find appropriate places to play and be goofy, but then also almost have permission to be silly and goofy and play again. Why do you
yeah.
think that is? Why do you think that sort of goes away in adulthood, that we're not necessarily allowed to do that anymore?
Because life's so serious, we become busy. We don't have time to do that.
Yeah.
And my thing is, and I spoke about this very recently, that I think all adults need to set aside a play date for themselves every day in their
Mm,
diary, and it only has to be 10 minutes. Find something that you love doing and do it for 10 minutes a day. And if you can share that experience with somebody else, unbelievable.
yeah.
But we don't. And again, I feel time, I'm too busy. That's an excuse for it. That too many people use that. And once you, as I said, once you stop playing slowly, 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 you forget how to.
Yeah.
It reduces your creativity, your productivity, all these things that come with play slowly, slowly decrease. And I know myself, I'm at my most creative when I'm doing something I love and I'm passionate about, and I've had some engagement during the day that might be played. I think as teachers, we're very fortunate. I run a number of workshops now and conferences and things. And after one of those, I leave it and I'm so energized and I'm so creative because all I do in those is play. And it just really hits home with me that if I don't have a workshop for a week and I'm working at home, I'm doing different things, I'm nowhere near as creative as what I am because I need to play. We all need to play. So I think it'll come around more. Life should be fun. It's not about being serious, but I
Mm.
think the older we get, we really think that life's really serious. I need to be that adult. But as you just said, our kids need us to be fun, laughing, energetic, and you get that through play. So mine is find something you love and make sure you schedule time every day to do that.
So it reminds me of I talked to Dr. Peter Gray a while back on the podcast, and he's big on play, and he's big on the importance of play. And I was looking at your website, and on your website, you have these statistics about I think it's in the section of mindfulness and why it's important to sort of practice mindfulness. And one of the big, like, shocking numbers to me is that, and on your website it said, 800,000 people commit suicide each year.
Yep.
And it's just so crazy to me to think for me to think about. And Dr. Peter Gray, one of his big things is that when we lose play, it increases anxiety, it increases depression in
Yep.
children, right? And so as we're taking it away slowly, and we're doing it in a way that uh, we say it's for their safety. We want to keep them safe, but at the same time, we're making our kids more anxious, and we're making our kids, fall into these cycles, these hurtful cycles. And I
Yep.
wonder what we can do about that, because even though there's books written about how this is the safest time in the world, I think a lot of times as parents, we try to hold on to a tight leash on our kids, and we don't let them do some of those risky behaviors that they sort of need to do to learn how to navigate the world.
Yeah, well, and I think it comes back to emotional literacy, that we're not we're not teaching our students to be lifelong players, or
Mhm.
different things. So that number 800,000, that is on the rise, and it'll continue to rise, because and it makes me sad, and that's why
Yeah.
I want to do the work I'm doing, Hooray, because once we get to like high school, elementary school, we it's all results based. It's all
Mhm.
testing,
Mhm.
And my thing is, once you leave university or high school, I haven't done a test since. So why is life all about results testing? Shouldn't it be the number one? I think the number one skill you can have is being creative and passionate.
Mm.
But we're allowed to do that in primary school, or yeah, in primary school. But then we get older and we go to university, and it's all about results.
Yeah.
So our system is wrong. It's not about how well you can do on a test, how well you can cram something to memorize something, because that
Right.
isn't something you need. Like, you look at all the jobs that are coming out for people these days. A lot of kids that are in school now, their job hasn't even been created, because someone will create something that we don't even know about. So play is where we get that creativity from. So why are we stopping it? Why aren't we allowing our kids to do this? And the anxiety, stress, depression will rise. 2030, the biggest killer in the world by the World Health Organization, is going to be depression. And the reason
Wow.
is that we are putting so much pressure on kids, adults, parents, teachers, everybody, to get results, to be serious. And that's why these stats are going through the roof. And that is an alarming stat, but it is going to continue. And just recently, when I was teaching in London, one of the guys I taught with, we had this, and it's made me really upset over the weekend, that he recently went through a marriage breakup, and that he's gone missing. And he did this big post on social media about how just life wasn't fair, and he's just gone missing. And it made me think, like, how do you get to that stage where you've just got no hope, or nothing else is going on? And unfortunately, with social media, people use it in a negative way. There are
Yeah.
trolls, there's all these different things. And
Yeah.
when you stop having fun in your day and you start focusing on all these negatives, life can get pretty tough. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about having fun every day, playing, and not being so serious. Life isn't so serious, but we make it so serious. And I think it all comes back to just wanting those results, start giving people a ranking,
Mm.
testing, all these different things. And unfortunately, it is going to continue to increase, mate.
Yeah, and something you brought up made me think about the social media effect, right? Um, I was reading Jonathan Haidt's recent book, and I forget what it's called now, but he talks about the effects of social media, and especially on young children. So they're getting on their Instagram at you know 11, 10 years old, and they're looking at all these pictures, and people put these these pictures of themselves online that are not themselves, right? So they try to make themselves out to be something that they're not. And then young people are looking at that and saying, "Well, I'm not that either," right? And then they start comparing themselves, and then that leads to anxiety and depression and everything
Correct.
else, and this vicious cycle. And sometimes I wonder if social media is too much. there's some great things. Obviously, there's some great
Yeah,
ways to connect to people, and like what we're doing right now. If
yeah,
we
of
didn't have
course.
this technology, we wouldn't be able to connect. But sometimes I wonder if we have to know everybody's business all the time. You know what
Well,
I mean?
yeah, I mean, I do, and I call this the Instagram effect because people post the 1% of their day that is amazing,
And,
and
and
they
but it's
might put,
fabricated. It's not even
yeah,
their
of
day.
course,
They posed everything and said, "Look at my
yeah,
day. It's amazing," but
yeah.
it's not even real.
No, it's not, and they might have put 8 different
Sometimes.
filters on it. They might
Uh,
they might
ab-
have put 8 filters on it,
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
and a lot of the time they might post this photo and it looks amazing. They say how good their life is, but then they're so unhappy themselves. And
Mm,
so the worst thing is that when you're not in a good headspace, and what do? You scroll through social media. And I'm not bagging social media away because I see the massive positives to it, and
yeah,
the
yeah,
world is like connected. And particularly as teachers, what we're doing right now is just incredible. But if you're not in a good headspace and you're scrolling through that, you're seeing how amazing everybody else's life is, how good they look, how awesome the things they're doing. So what do? You start comparing your life. I'm not good enough. I don't have this. I don't look as good as them. All right. And it's a vicious cycle. It gets
yeah,
worse and worse and worse. And you go down this rabbit hole, you start spinning, and it can be a really negative place. So that's where having positive self-worth, or, you know, doing things for yourself that is a non-negotiable every day, even if you're not feeling well, is really important, because there are so many factors out there that you can compare, you can get envious, you can judge. There's all these, it's very easy to do now because we don't allow ourselves to be bored. All right. If we're ever bored,
yes,
for example, no one's ever bored anymore. Right.
right,
And I do this a lot, that I try and not take my phone somewhere I'm going. And so, for example, the other day I was out for a coffee with someone. What do I do straight away when they went to the toilet? Get my phone out. So now I try and not take it with me, and I
yeah,
just sit there and watch people. And it feels weird, but nobody is doing that. They're either on their phone or they're communicating. No one just sits there and observes. And I don't know if you notice this, but on the train or public transport or waiting for someone, everybody has got their hand down on their device. Nobody
absolutely.
is ever bored.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I was having that conversation with my kids the other day. We were what were we doing? We were driving somewhere or something. We don't own a car here, but so every now and then I rent a car, and it's like an hour to to the big city. And I think we probably were going to the mall to like buy some clothes for my kids or something like that. And they didn't bring anything to entertain them, right? And they said, "Well, what are we supposed to do?" And I was
Yes.
like, "Just be bored. It's okay. Just look out the window and there's nothing but sand on that on that trip to Jeddah, but just look out the window, see if you can spot a camel or something. Or do nothing. It's okay. You don't have to do
Yeah.
something all the time.
It's and I think that's one thing that we are anxious, because when we don't have something to do, we start.
Yeah.
I need something to do. I need my phone. I need.
But
You need that
but you know
safety
what?
blanket.
Being bored, I think, also helps with creativity. So
Hundred
sometimes
percent, it
you
does.
have to be bored in order to create something that gets you out of that boredom, right? And
Yeah,
so if you don't have anything, figure it out. And I
yeah.
think that's good. I think that adds to your creativity.
It definitely does. But I totally agree with what you're saying about that. But we don't allow ourselves to get bored, so then we don't get that creativity hit,
Mm,
because we've just got devices. So
yeah,
it's like everything in life. There's positives and there's negatives. If you use something in the right way, it's fantastic.
yeah,
But with those stats we're talking about before, if you're not in a good headspace, then social media is going to be your worst enemy,
yeah.
because comparison, envy, judgment, those three will slowly eat you up. And there's not really much else you can say about that. That's plain and simple. And if you haven't been bored for a while, allow yourself to be. I bet it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, yeah, and then when you figure out what to do, then that'll be the entertainment, the fun, the play that you
Yeah.
could have because you were bored, you figured it out, and then you can play.
Well, you allowed yourself to be in that boredom state, that then you
Yeah,
had to figure something out for yourself, instead of having a device that just click between apps and it'll do it for you.
yeah, yeah, and sometimes, I mean, I'm guilty of it too, right? I mean, I think we've
Oh, we
all
all
been
are.
there, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll check my phone, and there's nothing there that I even want to see, but I'm just scrolling and
Hey, we all do
endlessly
it.
and it's like, what am I doing? Why don't I just go outside or talk
Yeah.
to somebody or something?
Well, and that's it. Like, and I'm definitely not perfect because I do it as well. But I'm making a conscious effort now not to,
Yeah, yeah,
because I just like, why am I doing that? I could be actually doing something for myself in a positive light instead of mindlessly scrolling something that's not real,
yeah.
and just wasting my time.
And it's great too. And sometimes I get into the trap of kind of forgetting is just going out into nature. I think that's so important, and it's something that we lose when we're entertained all the time, when we have these devices, when we have all the comforts that we have, and we just neglect it. But I think
Yeah.
that's kind of also a necessity too, just being out in nature and enjoying the world around us.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And one of the things is, I've got a dog and I live near the beach. So I would always walk her and have my headphones on, listening to an audiobook or a podcast or Spotify. What I've started doing now is I just don't take that with me and I just walk. And
Mm,
it's amazing. Everybody else who walk past or whatever that's doing similar things with a dog or running or whatever, they all got headphones in. And I I understand it's a really good way to do things, but every now and then just break that cycle, go outside without it. And I know for myself, I actually felt, and this is where I thought, Dale, you need to change this because you
yeah.
don't always need your phone on you. And people go, what happens when we need to contact you? I go, I don't want to be contacted. I don't want anyone to contact me. Do you know what I mean? We are 24/7 people can contact us. So particularly when you get out in nature, it is beautiful. Actually enjoy it. Don't have something else going on, or multitask, or say, oh, it's great. Every opportunity is a great opportunity to do something, but sometimes just going back to basics and doing nothing. Like we said, if you can take anything away from this podcast, do nothing. Schedule time to do nothing. And that sounds ridiculous, but it is so true, boy. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So like right now, you could pause the podcast and sit in silence for about 10 minutes.
finish the podcast. It's a great podcast.
All right. You know, you know, talking about being in nature, it reminds, so this last summer, we were actually in Australia, my family and I, and my wife's best friend was getting married, and so we spent I spent 2 weeks there. My wife spent 3 weeks there, and we were in the Gold Coast. And it
Beautiful.
was, oh my gosh, it was so gorgeous. And we had a chance to go hiking a couple times in the rainforest there, and it was so amazing. It was just, I mean, it sounds corny, but it was magical, walking
Yeah.
through this rainforest and seeing um, this waterfall, and just being able to uh, kind of be in touch with nature that way. I thought it was a
Yeah.
really cool experience, and I really loved um, the way that area especially kind of blended, the city life and then the nature life, right?
Yeah.
So I did want to ask you about the Australian Brushfires, and I know you were doing a fundraiser for that. So how's that going? Do you have any sort of news that you could share with us about how that is going?
Yeah, I can. So, my family and friends were like, I know people lost their houses and things like
Yeah.
that, but we were very fortunate that where I live in Melbourne and where my family lives in the country, that we weren't affected. But like the smoke that the air quality was horrific, and we were talking about it. And we weren't even in the fires, so the magnitude of these fires were just devastating. And so with that, myself and Kyle Wood, who I run another podcast with called The Trainers Tribe, he runs a website called bootcampideas.com. And if any teachers are listening now, he's got some fantastic fitness workouts on there, and they're a lot of free. So go and check those out. But we do a lot of work together, and I was actually on my honeymoon in Byron Bay. So it was actually probably very close to where you were in the Gold Coast. And the fires along the New South Wales coast were horrific, and a lot of them were on the beach. And
Mm,
just the smoke and the effects they were having everywhere, I was like, I wanted to do something that made an impact. So myself and Kyle did a week-long challenge, and not a challenge, so a week-long sale where he's got a membership site and I've got one called fitnessgamezone.com, and we both made them just basically nearly free. So we put our packages together and said anybody that wants to buy, or any members that want to buy this, and we did it at like this ridiculous price. You can basically get it, and all the money went to the fires. So we nearly raised $10,000, which was
Wow,
pretty cool.
that's great.
And yeah, we picked charities that probably weren't the biggest popular ones. We went sort of more remote and rural, so the money would go straight to them and really help them out. I know it's not a great thing, but one of the things I did love, and it really made me feel great, because it was probably 2 weeks after that I did my sale, that I was in Japan, in Yokohama, running like a workshop, and teachers from all over Asia came in, and they were all saying to me what they had done with their schools, and everybody, didn't matter if it was Hong Kong, China, Japan, Korea, wherever they were, everybody had done something for it. And it made me feel really happy that such
Yeah,
a horrific thing, Jorge, that, you know, people were around the world were doing whatever they could, and it made me feel really happy. So my little bit, it all adds together with everybody doing something. So I yeah, I was really touched by it, and everybody have always go, "Are you okay? Your family okay?" And I've got so many messages, and I think again it comes back to people just caring, and the power of social media in a really positive light. I know we've talked about it in a negative one, but the power of social media, when everybody getting behind it, because previously, before social media, a lot of people probably wouldn't even known about the bushfires in Australia. It was so
right,
far
right.
away from everywhere.
Hmm.
Yeah, so the sale went really well. We raised $10,000 for the people that really needed it, and yeah, but it's just so touching of the amount of people around the world that got involved and wanted to help out.
Yeah, and absolutely, I think that is the connecting power of social media that's so awesome, and that we have to figure out how to like harness more, like that's the power of community and helping others that we need more of and less of the other stuff.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but normally it sort of arises from a negative, and
Mm.
I think and that's the way it is. But at least from a negative, there's been a positive, and everyone banding together to try and really help the people that lost everything, and so many people did.
Yeah, that's awesome that you were able to do that. So if listeners wanted to help out, is that still going on or?
Nah, we did end up doing it for a week and a half.
Mm,
And the reason being, we wanted to, if we had kept it going, we wouldn't have been able to give them the money. So we wanted to really get in there and give them the money straight away. And I think that was sort of the driving force behind it. So if listeners do want to, I know there's a lot of charities out there that you can go and donate to. There's so many live events and things going on.
yeah.
I'm sure you could find something. But I think, yeah, the support, and for people that have been in those areas, the support has been overwhelming. I know a few of the areas in Victoria where I'm from that they said stop sending stuff because
Oh, wow.
like they couldn't deal with it, and
Yeah.
so, and then they had the opposite effect that they didn't know where to put all this stuff that people were sending. So um yeah, that's what I mean. People's generosity has just been amazing.
That's awesome. So speaking of awesome and positive experiences, I know you were just on the TEDx stage, and I saw that you put that out on social media. So that's really exciting. So I was wondering, could you give us a little sneak peek of what that talk was about?
Yeah.
I assume it's going to be released soon,
Yeah, well, I
hopefully.
hope so. I hope so. I really want to watch it myself. One of the most, and I spoke about this recently, that was one of the most terrifying experiences.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know why. Like I do keynotes, I speak every day. Like that's what I do for a job now. But I
How
was
did how did
so
that come
nervous.
about? Like how did the whole thing happen?
The Yeah, well, last year I interviewed this guy called Tanzil Ali on my podcast, and he was a four-time Australian memory expert. Like he is one of the best memory experts in the world. Anyway,
Oh,
at the end of
wow.
the podcast, he goes, "Dale, you're a really good interviewer and a really good speaker." And I don't think he really knew what I did. And he goes, "Have you? do you do much speaking? I said, oh, actually, that's what I do for my job now. I run workshops, I do this. He goes, mate, if you're ever interested, I run a TEDx in Melbourne. I said, oh, really? And he goes, mate, we'd love to, I'd love to have you as one of the talkers. I was like, oh, wow. So anyway, it took me a while, and it was actually, I run retreats in Bali for people, and one on the 5th day we challenge everyone in the morning. There's always a daily challenge to do, but one of them is step outside your comfort zone and do something that scares you. And for me, that was just submitting my proposal to TED, and I remember doing it in front of everyone. And I felt really like nervous, and
Yeah.
I was. And to be honest, for 3 months before the talk, when I knew I was going to be doing it, I really struggled to sleep. And the reason was I wanted to make it that perfect that it just kept going around and around in my head. And I think I revised it. I wouldn't know how many times. I filmed myself nearly 50 times. And
Wow.
oh, it was an amazing experience. I started off with a game. I don't think anyone's ever done that in the TED thing. So the energy was electric. It was all sort of around 4 things you need to do every day to be successful, have fun, and be in a good mindset. And I think that's some form of play. You need to move your body, you need to practice some form of gratitude, and you need to do some form of kindness for somebody else. And I related that back to a few different stories in my life. I talked about like a lot of things we've spoken about today around, social media, the judgment, envy, and comparison.
Mm.
And when you're not in a good space, and particularly the first 30 years of my life, I was always chasing happiness. I'll be happy when I get this. I'll be happy when I buy a house. I'll be, and I was always delaying that gratification away. And after a while, it slowly snowballs. And I speak about hitting rock bottom where I did, and then about the last 4 years of my life where I've sort of rebuilt my life and I've got a new outlook. And I'm not saying I wasn't a good person the first 30 years of my life, but the person I am now is such a better person. I was probably that person that while you were talking, I was just thinking about what I could say those first 30 years. But for the last 4, the biggest asset you can have is listening. My thing is now that every opportunity is a chance to learn from someone instead
Yeah.
of telling them what I've done, because no one cares, So I know I've rambled on a lot, but yeah, hopefully the TED Talk will be out in about 3 weeks, and I'm really excited to see it. It's called Narcissistic to Nice. Because I felt I had some really narcissistic traits for the
Mm.
first 30 years of my life. Not all the time. People go, you weren't always, but I was every now and then. I'd put people down, or I'd speak down to people, or like I just said, I'd talk about myself all the time. Whereas now I feel the last 4 years of my life, doing those 4 things I mentioned every day, that I am a much nicer person. And yeah, and I wanted to sort of bring that across in a fun way. So I used a lot of scientific evidence. I made it fun. I wore the most ridiculous. I wore like a party shirt with matching shorts. So it was quite fun. The guys recording it said, we have never, ever seen someone move around so much during a TED Talk. So, so they said you brought the energy, and that's sort of what I wanted to do. So I'm really excited. Yeah, hopefully it'll be out in, I don't know when this will go live away, but yeah, about 3 weeks from now.
Awesome. So definitely share that link with me, and I'd
I
love to
will,
share
mate.
that out as well. I
Yeah.
can't wait to watch it. I think it'd be so cool. Um, you are also presenting and keynoting at the PE Institute this summer.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about that. Could you give us a sneak peek of that? What's your keynote speech going to be about, and what are you going to be presenting?
Yeah, yeah. I'm really excited. It's one of those things now. I think I've presented in nearly 25 countries around the world, but the US
Wow.
for me the US has always been, the pinnacle, whereas the conferences that you guys have in America for teachers are just next level. Like, they are incredible. And too often I get to see it secondhand through social media, and I'm like, I want to go over and I want to do it properly. So I'm doing the P Institute, then I'm going to California and doing Peach Conference, and then EPEW. So I've got 3 back to back, which I'm really
Awesome.
excited about. And my keynotes in there it's going to be called make sure you put on your own oxygen mask first. So, and sort of reference back to the aeroplanes,
Yeah, I
that
love that.
and they always say that because I think as teachers, we are too often helping our students or parents, or we're putting our energy into others before we do it ourselves. And so I'm going to relate it back to some stories of myself, and then different skills. And it's going to be a brand new keynote. I've never done this one before, so I'm really excited about that. And I suppose the other sessions I'll just be running I've got a new one on gamifying wellness, so making sort of well-being and wellness in the classroom not fun, but when you gamify something away that the students actually don't realize what they're doing. And I
Mm.
try and do that in a lot of my things, and just a lot of the other stuff, making fitness fun, using dice and cards, mixing literacy and numeracy through games. So basically all the stuff I do is quite similar in a way that it's incorporating learning movement together, and now I'm sort of mixing that well-being aspect into it as well. So I'm stoked. There's so many people that I can't wait to meet in person, and also I'm a real big one that I draw all my goals. And about this time last year, in my book there's one more I still need to do, but there's a goal of me presenting on a big stage, and for me that's America, because there's no bigger conference. There's a TED talk, and there's one more to come. So I can't wait to come over. My wife's going to come over at the end as well, and we're going to do another 3 or 4 weeks traveling through the States, which I absolutely love. And so it's a really exciting thing. But for me personally, it's something I've wanted to do, and there's no bigger stage in the P Institute. So if you haven't got tickets, come along. I can't wait to meet everyone.
That is awesome. I won't be going back to the US this summer. I wish I was. I wish we could make it happen, but it's not going to happen. But if you're in the Houston area, make sure, or Texas at all, make sure you get some barbecue down there, because it's
Yeah, we're going to
fantastic.
go to Austin.
Oh, there
That's
you go.
part of it.
There's some good barbecue down there.
I
Go to
know that
Franklin's Barbecue.
apparently.
Amazing.
Good. Well, that's I've been to the States twice already, but I've never been to Texas. So my wife's never been to New York. So, and that's my favorite city in the world. So we're going to go back there, and we'll do a bit of time in LA and San Fran as well. So um, I just think it's great that I can come over and meet so many people, and present and connect, and then travel around just an unbelievable country as well. So it's going to be awesome.
That is so awesome. All right, so I know we're getting to the end of the hour here, and I feel like there's so much I want to ask you. So we definitely have to do this again. I thought this was a
Yeah,
really
mate.
cool conversation, but there's
I'd
so
love
much
to.
that I didn't even get to. I told you in the beginning of the episode I have all these notes, and I didn't get to half of them. So
Yeah, but I love that it's just been a conversation. I think, that's why you are one of the best in the business, mate, because it hasn't just been question, question, question. We're just generally had a conversation, and hopefully people have enjoyed listening to that. It's been brilliant, mate.
yeah, and I always say about like the podcast and the podcast format, I always have certain topics that I like to bring up. But if we're just flowing in the conversation,
Yeah,
then
don't stop
why
it.
ruin that? Let's just have a let's just talk. Let's just talk.
So true, mate.
But I do want to ask you, if somebody wanted to ask you a question, if they wanted to get a hold of you, they wanted to contact you, what's the best way to do that? And I want to also give you the last word. So if
Yeah.
you have a last message for the listeners, please feel free to leave that as well.
Yeah, cool. So I'm pretty big on Instagram or Twitter. I suppose they're probably. I'm on all of them, and as you probably guessed, not many people have the name Dale Sidebottom. It's a quite unique name. So if you just go on Twitter, my handle's at Dale Sidebottom, or on Instagram at Dale Sidebottom. You can reach out there, or my personal email is dale@energetic.education. And you can go on there and feel free to send me an email. Or if you've liked today's chat or anything like that, I'm pretty prevalent on the old social medias. I really love them. So and that's really about it. I don't really have anything else to mention, except that I've really enjoyed this chat, mate. It's always nice to be on the other end of the microphone, and one that I really enjoy these days. And I don't know if you get this a bit, but people always say, "Oh, can you send me through the questions that you're going to ask me on the podcast?" And I always say to people now that I don't have any questions, because I don't know what you're going to say. And so my biggest thing in life, and like I just said, you can never underestimate the power of listening, because if you listen, people will give you the questions. And I think that's all you need in life. And like I just said, mate, you have crushed that today, because I know you had some notes, but we've just talked and you've just listened to what I've said, and we've just gone with it. So I really appreciated the chat today, mate. And it's been an absolute blast.
All right. The feeling is mutual. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I appreciate all the work that you do. And we got to do this again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks a lot.
All right. You have a good day.